I don't think the focus at the C-suite level is always on ensuring quality of service in those types of situations. And what we see from dealing with our clients is they're very connected to their frontline team.
From standard pre-employment screening to best practices for hiring and onboarding in regulated industries, we're having conversations that truly matter in HR. That's the Background Check Podcast with your host and VP of Sales and Marketing at Data Screening, Fred Amakuchi.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining the Background Check Podcast. Today, we have a guest by the name of Christine Ippolito. Now, Christine has extensive experience in human resources, starting businesses and exceeding company goals, as well as culture and operations within organizations. Christine, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your work history?
Certainly. Well, I'm not a spring chicken, Fred. So I've been a professional for 32 years.
Oh wow!
I have a background in business and business operations. So I started out my career after earning my degree in business and retail management.
Okay.
Working for companies like Gap, different divisions of Levi Strauss, in a retail setting. Opening new stores, recruiting and staffing, working with customers. And that's really where my passion from HR came from.
Okay.
There was a critical difference that you could visibly see depending on how employees were recruited, selected, trained, and developed in the store performance. So I have a good amount of operational experience understanding how different HR procedures impact the operations of the business and how to measure return on investment and if things make economic sense and add value or if they don't. So I also have a master's in management and organizational development, which I got a little bit later in life. Then go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm starting too quick here. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of questions but go on. Sorry.
Sure. So I decided to go back and get my master's in HR after being out of school for about 10 years, and I did it part-time and at night. And I was fortunate enough to be doing this in the late 90s, and for those of us that were around, that was the great dot-com bubble. So I got to experience performing HR in venture capital and equity-backed small tech companies that would go full life cycle in a matter of, 2.5 to 3 years. So full backing, heavy recruitment, massive growth, massive employee investment in programs, and then a sale and a transition, generally to a much larger, older organization. And oftentimes those mergers just resulted in disaster because you were combining two totally different cultures that never operated in the same way, didn't appreciate the value that the other brought to the table. And when you overpay for something, then all of a sudden people need to cut back. So I actually went through one acquisition like that where more than half of the acquired employees and their technical expertise and their knowledge were laid off about 6 months later. So that's a prime example of a merger disaster.
It's funny.
Where you just lost half of what you paid for.
It's really crazy because in our industry, there's a handful of background check companies that are huge and well known. Obviously, we're more of a medium-sized company, and a lot of times, they're our competition. We go against these bigger companies, and what we found is two things. Number one, when you're dealing with a larger company, you as a business, they can't pivot as fast as, say, a smaller company or a smaller vendor. That's one thing you really want to keep in mind. If you want to change something within your contract or your operations with your vendor, sometimes when you're dealing with a larger company, they have to go through a lot of hoops to get that done. Dealing with a medium, small size company, it's a little bit easier sometimes. But my point actually was being that what we found is we actually have gotten a lot of clients from bigger background check companies, because what they've been doing is they've actually been buying smaller background check companies. And what happens is some of those clients drop off. They don't get the same service just because of that merger, the transaction. You can't really, these larger companies can't really control and see all the customers, all the clients. So we've actually been able to get a lot of clients that way. And unfortunately, a lot of times, and I mean, you know more than I do with this, but I think that happens more often than not with these acquisitions, right? I mean, you're losing a good piece of the business only because you're not organized and ready to take on that new business, I bet. Is that kind of true? Accurate?
Well, I think usually the first thing that happens is, your frontline employees are the ones that usually are communicated to the least and know the least about the acquisition, are most fearful of losing their job. They're assigned to a new manager. And that's where the service dynamic just changes almost overnight. I mean, It's hard. I don't think the focus at the C-suite level is always on ensuring quality of service in those types of situations. And what we see from dealing with our clients is they're very connected to their frontline team, whether it's their team at Compass, their team that we work with at the payroll provider. And if your service person changes every month or every quarter, people get very frustrated. So I just had a client yesterday express extreme dissatisfaction with one of the very, very large payroll companies, probably number 2, and saying, for the umpteenth time this year, we get assigned a new person that knows nothing about us, and there's mistakes in the payroll. So it's, bigger is not always better.
Yeah.
I agree with you, especially during the pandemic. I think a lot of small businesses were much able to leverage the pivot, the change in direction, and the passion that their teams had for keeping things alive and being able to, make a remote jump.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of us, we were prepared. We were already ready. People can work from home even before the pandemic, but a lot of people, they don't have the technology, they don't have the organization, the structure, they don't know what to do. But I think that's really important nowadays, obviously, because everything's moving toward that way. And by the way, I totally forgot to even mention your company name, and I'm sorry about that. Christine is founder of Compass Workforce Solutions, and it's really funny, Christine. Some of my guests, every one of my guests I have spoken to before they were a guest on our podcast. You were the first guest that I have never spoken to, ever. So this is really great because it's a natural, organic learning experience for me, learning about your business. Paul, one of our sales reps here, went crazy about how great you would be as a guest. So I really appreciate you coming on. And I don't know if you know anything about our company, but our founder, you guys are part of WeBank, right? I think.
Well, we're a New York City certified women-owned business.
Oh, okay.
And we filed our state application, and our WeBank application is under review. But yes, we're women-owned.
Okay. Yeah, that our founder joined WeBank fairly quickly, I think. And that's embarrassing that I don't even know that. But I know I've been with the company for 7 years. I know we've been a part of WeBank, obviously, for those 7 years and even before that. And our founder, Karen Jacobson, was actually on the certification committee. So it was a great opportunity for her to go out and meet new female business owners because, it is a tedious process, right? I mean, obviously, you just went through it. So that was a great situation we had. So from the beginning, we had some of our biggest and best clients, and still do, as fellow WeBank members. So anyone out there listening who is a female business owner, that's something you want to look into. It's a really great organization. Now, I mean, you have so you started out in HR, or was it you moved into HR from your original employment?
Right. So I started out as a retail store manager.
Okay.
So I was involved in a lot of facets of HR, and actually we used to hire people with zero recruiting budget. I'm from the generation where we would sit outside the
Word of
stores with
mouth.
tables
Yeah.
before the computer age existed and you could apply online. And we would talk to people that were walking by, or we would walk the mall for applicants and paper applications. So I've seen the whole evolution from, face-to-face recruiting and job fairs all the way now up through this, environment that we're in, where a lot of people are hired with 100% remote interview and selection processes.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I'm sort of old school. My background, I was an inside sales rep for about 12 years. And a lot of heavy phone volume, a lot of call volume, excuse me. And so it's funny, whenever I walk around the office and I hear, I probably mentioned this 100 times on my other episodes, but a lot of people, they'll say, oh my God, this person doesn't understand me. Went back and forth with email 5 times. I'll say, hey, pick up the phone, And, a lot of people, when they're saying, oh, we can't find people to work, I said, you know what? Go outside, take a walk. Start talking to people, have some brochures, People don't, it's like crazy sometimes. People forget that the most basic form of communication, looking at a person and talking to them, you can still do. You don't have to, try to grow your business electronically. You could actually just go out and talk to people. So that's almost like one of my pet peeves. I feel like people are so geared up on, using technology so much that they forget, you can actually talk to people. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right, Fred. I launched my business back in 2009 by doing presentations and seminars at Chamber of Commerce, at different business groups. I was fortunate enough that the Affordable Care Act was just passed.
Yeah.
We had a lot of questions. Obviously, small business owners had a lot of questions about that. We had a lot of legislative changes going on in New York and New Jersey after coming out of the recession.
Yep.
So it was really an amazing time, and there was a never-ending stream of things to talk about and information to share with people, and building those personal relationships with business advisors, influencers, CPAs, other business owners was how I built, really, from having one client to where we're at today. So it's very I guess the word is, I feel very blessed to be able to reach the 3% of female-owned businesses that do over $1 million a year in revenue.
I read that. I read that in your LinkedIn profile, and we're happy to be part of that group. We've exceeded $1 million quite some time ago, and I didn't know that 3%. That's crazy.
Yep, only 3% of women-owned businesses ever get to that point. There's some really interesting statistics. And I think a lot of women are particularly hard on themselves. We all set very high expectations. Mm-hmm. But if you can get to $500,000 a year, if you can survive for 5 years and start making a profit, you're definitely well on your way to success. And I don't think those things are really talked about that much. Everybody looks at Amazon. What is it now? Meta. It's no longer Facebook, and thinks that's the typical model of business. But 85% of all jobs in the United States come from small businesses under 500 employees. So we're tiny but powerful.
Yeah. And the other thing I think about too is a lot of, you hear about a lot of these bigger companies, and something I love to do is look back and see how these companies started, like Jeff Bezos. I think everyone has seen that 60 Minutes episode where he just basically first started, and he's laughing almost uncontrollably a lot with the reporter. But people have to realize a lot of these bigger companies, they started out one person show. I mean, that it was a person's dream. They got bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's how these things get started. And it's you just have to. If you take no for an answer, just keep going, keep pushing. I think anyone could be successful. Obviously, they have to take a number of steps. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think the other critical piece and something that's probably very important to your listeners is how you build your team, how you're recruiting, how you're selecting. The players on the team are absolutely critical. I don't think any of us has the illusion that we're successful on our own.
Yeah.
So it's the power of the team that you're able to build around you.
One of the things you had mentioned when you were going into your work experience, you worked for Gap and other retail stores and whatnot. One of the things I thought about is the branches. Now, so you obviously, I'm guessing that you, at that time, you were able to compare the different branches and how one was successful over the other. And they're basically selling the same product, same advertising. So therefore, you did a deeper dive and you say, hey, it's something within the people or the culture of that branch or the operations. Is that accurate?
Yes. So, I mean, as an operations manager for Gap, and I worked at the Old Navy division, we were compared to each other. So, for example, the different store locations, our sales were compared, that same day last year to that same day this year, month to date, year to date, quarter to date. We all had very similar merchandise. I mean, the variety only really flexes slightly by the size of the store. But what the difference was how you ran the store, how you ran your team, and the people that you worked with, and the service level that they were providing to the customers. So that was really the game changer in who was going to be successful.
It's funny you say that because when you think about it, I'm assuming every branch had the same training, textbooks and training and whatnot. So it's almost like, well, gee, how come one branch is doing so much better than the other branch? So it shows you that, no matter how much training or book things and whatnot, it really depends on the people who are actually behind that training, no matter how much.
Well, the people and the communication.
Yeah.
If you're not an effective communicator and you're not clear, you don't delegate well, you don't give strong instruction, you're not able to lead people through a process that they can then repeat, you're not going to get the same result over and over.
Thank you for listening in. Stay tuned for the next part in this conversation. And don't forget to subscribe anywhere you listen.